Here lies Rudolf Vrba, who saved 200,000 lives as a teenager.
The year is 1944. 19-year-old Vrba sees trains carrying thousands of Jews into Auschwitz daily. He's determined to halt the inflow. The problem? He himself is a Jew trapped in that Nazi labor and death camp. By then, Vrba had spent 2 years in Auschwitz. He was as well treated as an Auschwitz Jew could be. He had earned the trust of his captors and become a camp registrar. So he not only had an office, he could also roam around the camp. Vrba was previously severely malnourished and beaten unconscious, but he was now in good health, occasionally eating meals like goulash soup. While Vrba could be executed for breaking any camp rule, the risk of death was low if he followed the rules. The continuous inflow of trains worried Vrba, but what was especially unnerving was the chatter among the German guards. They were talking about eating Hungarian salami. What did they mean? The Nazis told European Jews that they would be sent to resettlement camps in Eastern Europe. Hence, many Jews complied when asked to board trains. They brought food and their belongings with them. When Dutch Jews arrived in Auschwitz, they brought cheese. Greek Jews took olives with them, and so on. These were all taken away when they arrived at Auschwitz. So German guards were saying that Hungarian Jews were about to be deported to Auschwitz. The last intact Jewish population in Nazi-occupied Europe was facing decimation. When Jews arrived at Auschwitz, they were separated into two groups, those who were fit for work and those who weren't. The second group was told that they would be showering. In reality, they were sent to the gas chamber. The first group was relatively lucky. They performed hard labor. They could stay alive if they remained fit for work. Vrba could not stop thinking about this. But Vrba had realized the Nazi death camp system relied on one thing. Jews did not know their true fate when they boarded the trains. Vrba reasoned that if Jews knew their true fate, they would not willingly board those trains. He had to exploit the weakness by escaping and warning the world. But how would he escape? Auschwitz had two sets of sentry posts, an inner ring and an outer ring. The outer ring was guarded during the day, as prisoners needed a big space to work. The German guards had machine guns with them. There would be a roll call every evening. If no one was missing, the outer ring sentries would withdraw to the inner ring. The inner ring was guarded at night as prisoners slept. It had electric fences and a water moat. But if someone was missing, the outer ring would be guarded for 72 hours. Guards and dogs would search the camp repeatedly for the missing prisoner. Only if the prisoner couldn't be found after 72 hours would they be presumed escaped. Then security would revert to normal. In other words, the outer ring would only be guarded during the day. However, Vrba again realized there was a weakness. If a prisoner could hide between the inner and outer ring for 72 hours, they would be free to escape thereafter. He found a co-escapee by the name of Vrba and Wetzler. At 2 p.m. on April 7, 1944, they hid in a hole underneath a wooden pile near the outer ring. To throw off the dogs, they sprinkled the wooden planks with gasoline-soaked tobacco. They brought bread and water into the hole, though neither of them had the appetite to eat much. They also carried knives and razor blades, as they were determined not to be captured alive. At 6 p.m., sirens sounded, indicating that at least one prisoner had been found missing. It was the start of a nerve-wracking 3 days. Thousands of boots and hundreds of dogs trampled around the camp, looking for any sign of life. Close to the end of the 72 hours, Vrba and Wetzler heard two men dismantling the wooden planks above them. The escapees drew their knives. But as the last few layers were about to be dismantled, Sheer good luck saved their lives. A faraway commotion pierced the air. They've got them! The pair of dismantlers concluded that the escapees had been found. They rushed towards the scene. At the end of the 72 hours, Vrba and Wetzler heard the words they had been waiting for.
Bostenkette abziehen.
The German guards were ordered to retreat to the inner ring. The escapees were relieved that the Germans had admitted defeat, at least for now. 2 hours later, Vrba and Wetzler emerged from their hole. They began a 2-week journey to Slovakia using a map that Vrba had memorized. Their journey wasn't easy. Poles were told that if they helped an escaping prisoner, they and their families would be shot. Indeed, some Poles were shot by Germans pretending to be escaped prisoners. Still, Vrba and Wetzler lucked out by finding a Polish lady who fed them and let them stay the night. Germans, whether they be military or civilian, had orders to shoot strangers on sight. Indeed, 6 days after their escape, a German patrol fired at Vrba and Wetzler, but they escaped. On the 25th of April, Vrba and Wetzler arrived in Žilina, Slovakia. 2 members of the Slovak Jewish Council interviewed them. The council had records of every single deportation. In fact, the council had written the deportation notices themselves. They reasoned that if they refused the Nazis' demand to organize deportations, the Nazis would do it themselves more brutally. As such, it was easy for the escapees to prove their identities. Vrba and Wetzler gave their deportation dates and points of origin. They also named several others who took the train with them. The escapees also earned the trust of their interviewers. They named people who had arrived in Auschwitz months after their arrival. The names and dates Vrba and Wetzler gave tallied with the council's records. The escapees were separated for much of their interview. Yet, their descriptions of Auschwitz were almost identical. Over the course of 48 hours, Vrba and Wetzler shared the knowledge they gained as registrars. The gas chambers, the total number of people killed from each country, the forced labor, and so on. The interviewers summarized everything into a 32-page report. It contained maps of Auschwitz. It described the selection and gassing process in remarkable detail. And it estimated the number of Jews from each country that had been gassed. The report also explained, our interviewees' claims match with the little we've heard from reliable sources. Our interviewees also correctly named dates when specific people arrived at Auschwitz. So we completely believe our interviewees. And yet, some in the council disbelieved the report. One lawyer couldn't believe that civilized Germany was executing people without due process. Walter yelled at the way some of them reacted. Back there they are flinging people into the fire at this moment, and in 3 days they'll kill thousands. Do something immediately. Wetzler tried to restrain Vrba, but Vrba continued. You, and you will all finish up in the gas unless something is done. Eventually, the council translated and disseminated the report. It will become known as the Vrba-Wetzler report. Rezo Kästner was one of the first recipients of the report. Kästner was one of Hungary's most powerful Jews. He had been working to smuggle Jews out of Nazi-occupied Europe. After Kästner read the report, Vrba eagerly awaited news of a revolt. 2 weeks later, that hope turned into anger. Vrba's housekeeper said, "They are deporting the Hungarians. Thousands of them. They are passing through Žilina in cattle trucks." After the war, Vrba would learn that Kästner had struck a deal with the Nazis. The Nazis would send 1,700 Jews from Hungary to neutral Switzerland, and Kästner would allow over 500,000 Jews to be deported to concentration camps. Still, the report's dissemination continued. The New York Times reported it on 4 June and the BBC reported it on 15 June. it reached the hands of the US President and the Pope. They called on Hungarian regent Miklos Horthy to stop deporting Jews. On 26 June, the US warned that anyone who deports Jews will be dealt with. While Horthy had previously passed many anti-Jewish laws, he immediately ordered a stop to the deportation of Jews. Within 2 weeks, he suppressed a coup attempt and fired anyone who was likely to disobey the order. By 5 July, all deportations from Budapest had stopped. 400,000 Jews in Hungary had been killed. But the remaining 200,000 Jews of Budapest, most of whom were about to be deported, were safe. And that's how 19-year-old Rudolf Vrba stopped many trains from arriving at Auschwitz. So, what can we learn from this? One obvious lesson is that every system has a weakness. When you fight Achilles, look for his heel. Vrba realized this twice. Once when he saw that Nazi concentration camps relied on deception, and again when he realized that he could escape Auschwitz by hiding for 72 hours. But to me, the bigger lesson is to live life for a cause greater than myself. The Holocaust may not be happening today, but countless people are in need. Yes, I need to pick my battles. And even then, there'll be uncertainty about whether I can achieve my goals. But we can only do great things if we act.
And to escape only for my own sake would be ridiculous.